The reason Capricorn becomes successful later in life. Most people measure success by when it arrives. Early success gets celebrated. It gets talked about. It becomes the benchmark, the thing everyone is quietly measuring themselves against. The prodigy. The overnight story. The person who seemed to have it figured out before the rest of the room. And then there's Capricorn. Capricorn rarely fits that story. Not because the capability isn't there, it usually is and often it's exceptional. But because Capricorn's relationship with time is fundamentally different from almost every other sign in the zodiac. Not slower exactly. More like deeper. More like a structure being built from the foundation rather than the roof. Here's the paradox that sits at the center of this sign. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, the planet most associated with limitation, delay, and discipline. And yet Saturn is also the planet most associated with mastery. With the kind of achievement that doesn't collapse under pressure because it was built correctly from the ground up over time. The reason Capricorn tends to arrive later, to find their fullest expression of success in their 30s, 40s, or even beyond, isn't a disadvantage dressed up as wisdom. It's a genuine architectural reality. Capricorn is not built for sprints. They are built for the kind of distance that most people don't have the patience to run. But understanding why, the psychological, astrological, and deeply human reasons behind this pattern, reveals something far more interesting than a simple story about late bloomers. It reveals a particular kind of person who is, in many ways, only fully understood in retrospect. To understand why Capricorn succeeds later, you have to understand what Capricorn is actually made of. And that begins always with Saturn. Saturn is the sixth planet from the Sun, the last one visible to the naked eye in the ancient world, and in astrology, it represents the boundary between the personal and the transpersonal. It governs time, structure, responsibility, limitation, and the slow but undeniable relationship between effort and reward. Where Jupiter expands, Saturn contracts. Where Venus softens, Saturn sharpens. Where Neptune dissolves, Saturn defines. For Capricorn, Saturn isn't just a ruling planet. It's a psychological orientation. It shapes how they process experience, how they measure worth, how they relate to their own ambitions, and, critically, how they relate to the concept of deserving. Saturn teaches through time. Not cruelty, not randomness, time. The belief, embedded at a fundamental level, that things which matter require duration. That shortcuts are, at best, temporary. That the most solid achievements are the ones built slowly, with full understanding of every layer beneath them. This is not a comfortable teaching. In a culture that celebrates speed, fast results, instant visibility, rapid growth, the Saturnian orientation can feel like a punishment, can feel like falling behind. And for many Capricorns, especially in their 20s, this is exactly how it feels. But there's a psychological depth to this placement that goes beyond simple patience. Capricorn is a cardinal earth sign. Cardinal meaning it initiates, it leads, it begins. Earth meaning it grounds, it builds, it makes things real and tangible. The combination of these two qualities, initiating energy channeled through material reality, produces someone who is not content to simply imagine success. They need to construct it. And construction, real construction, takes time. The psychological profile that emerges from this combination is one of the most complex in the zodiac. Capricorn is simultaneously ambitious and cautious, driven and deliberate, capable of enormous vision and deeply skeptical of anything that hasn't been tested by reality. They carry within them from very early on, a seriousness about life that their peers often don't share, and that seriousness is both their greatest asset and, at certain stages of life, their heaviest burden. To understand the internal experience of being a Capricorn moving through the world, you have to understand something about how Saturn shapes the inner life, not just the outer behavior. Many Capricorns carry, from an early age, a sense of responsibility that exceeds what their circumstances actually require. This isn't always the result of difficult childhood experiences, though sometimes it is. More precisely, it's a psychological predisposition toward taking life seriously, toward feeling the weight of things, toward understanding even as children that effort matters, that consequences are real, and that nothing truly valuable comes without cost. This orientation produces a particular kind of inner critic, not the anxious inner critic of other signs, not the perfectionism of Virgo or the self-doubt of Pisces, but something more structural. A Capricorn's inner critic sounds less like panic and more like an auditor. It reviews the evidence. It asks whether the foundation is solid. It is slow to approve and quick to identify what still needs work. The psychological consequence of this is significant. Capricorn rarely feels ready. Not because they lack capability, Often they are more prepared than anyone in the room, but because their internal standard for readiness is exceptionally high. They can see, with uncomfortable clarity, everything that is still incomplete. Every gap in their knowledge. Every area where more experience would help. Every risk that hasn't been fully accounted for. This is where the delay often comes from. Not external obstacles, though those exist too, but an internal threshold that keeps moving forward precisely because Capricorn keeps raising it. The goal becomes clearer as they approach it, which means it also becomes more complex. And so the preparation continues. The foundation deepens. The structure gets stronger. What's happening psychologically is a process of genuine consolidation. Capricorn is not procrastinating. They are integrating. Every experience is being processed not just for what it produced but for what it taught. Every failure, and Capricorn has them, quiet and private and rarely discussed, becomes structural information. A lesson folded into the foundation so thoroughly that it cannot be repeated in quite the same way. By the time Capricorn arrives at their fullest expression of success, they have usually built something that most people cannot see the depth of from the outside. The visible achievement is only the surface. Beneath it is an architecture of earned understanding that took years to construct, and that, unlike achievements built on speed or luck or timing, tends to hold. This pattern manifests across every dimension of Capricorn's life, and it's worth tracing carefully, because it doesn't always look like what people expect from someone described as ambitious and driven. In their career, Capricorn often moves through an early period of what might look, from the outside, like underperformance. They may be in roles that don't fully reflect their capability. They may be learning industries, building skills, watching how systems work before they attempt to lead them. They are rarely the loudest person in the room in their 20s. They are, more often, the one in the corner who is paying attention to everything. What's actually happening during this period is a form of deep preparation that most people skip. Capricorn is learning not just how to do the work but how the entire structure operates, the politics, the patterns, the points of failure, the places where real leverage exists. By the time they step into leadership, and they usually do, eventually, they understand the system they're leading in a way that someone who rose quickly simply cannot. This is why Capricorn leaders often age so well professionally. The things that make early career success difficult, the refusal to oversimplify, the insistence on understanding the full picture, the unwillingness to perform confidence they don't feel, become significant advantages with time and experience. In relationships, this same pattern appears in a different form. Capricorn is often a late bloomer emotionally as well as professionally. Not because they don't feel deeply, they do, often more deeply than they ever express, but because their emotional architecture is built on the same Saturnian principles as everything else. They need to trust before they open. They need to observe before they commit. They need to understand what they're choosing before they choose it fully. This means that Capricorn's most significant relationships often develop later, or deepen significantly in later years, when they have enough self-knowledge to choose with clarity rather than simply with need. The partnerships they build in maturity tend to be remarkably solid, chosen with intention, maintained with consistency, and deepened over time rather than burning brightly and fading. In friendships, Capricorn is usually selective and slow to fully open, but extraordinarily reliable once they do. They are the friend who doesn't necessarily check in constantly, but who appears without being asked, exactly when it matters. Their loyalty is structural rather than performative. It shows up in actions over years rather than in declarations. And in their own decision-making, Capricorn demonstrates perhaps most clearly the pattern that defines them, a preference for decisions that are built to last over decisions that feel good immediately. This can create friction, with partners who want faster commitment, with employers who want faster results, with a culture that equates speed with intelligence. But the decisions Capricorn makes slowly, after full consideration, tend to hold up in ways that faster decisions rarely do. As with every pattern examined honestly, the same qualities that create Capricorn's distinctive path to success carry within them a genuine shadow. And naming that shadow clearly is not a criticism. It's simply the other side of the same coin. The most significant shadow of this pattern is the tendency to defer life. Capricorn can become so oriented toward future achievement, so focused on building the foundation correctly before moving to the next level, that the present tense of their life begins to feel like a waiting room. The relationships, the experiences, the joy that is available right now can get quietly postponed in favor of the next milestone, the next level of readiness, the next thing that needs to be consolidated before allowing oneself to simply be present. This deferral rarely feels like avoidance from the inside. From the inside it feels like responsibility, like being realistic, like not getting ahead of oneself. But the cumulative effect, over years, can be a life that was fully prepared for but somehow never fully inhabited. There's a related shadow in how Capricorn relates to their own achievements once they arrive. Because the internal standard keeps advancing, because the inner auditor is always identifying what still needs work, Capricorn can arrive at genuine success and find that it doesn't feel the way they imagined. The milestone that was supposed to signal arrival passes, and there's already a new horizon forming. The satisfaction that was being saved for later keeps getting postponed along with everything else. This is one of Saturn's more difficult lessons, and it's one that Capricorn often has to learn the hard way. The habit of deferral that served them so well in building something real can become, without careful attention, a habit of never fully receiving what was built. The isolation shadow is also worth naming. Because Capricorn processes so much internally, and because their emotional expression is typically contained and managed, they can become genuinely difficult to reach, even for people who care about them deeply and who are trying to connect. The wall that was built for protection during vulnerable years can persist long past the point where it's necessary, creating a loneliness that is felt privately but rarely addressed directly. And in professional life, the shadow can appear as an excessive conservatism, a reluctance to take risks that aren't fully calculated, a tendency to wait for certainty that, in some contexts, never fully arrives. Capricorn's careful preparation is a strength, but there are moments in life where imperfect action beats perfect readiness. Recognizing those moments and acting in them despite incomplete information is a skill that doesn't come naturally to this sign. The evolution available to Capricorn is not about becoming less of what they are. It's not about speeding up or lowering standards, or abandoning the Saturnian orientation that gives them their distinctive depth. It's about something more subtle and more significant than any of that. It's about learning to live in the present tense of their own life. The most important growth edge for Capricorn is the development of what we might call present tense permission, the ability to acknowledge that the life being lived right now, in all its incompleteness and ongoing construction, is not the rehearsal. It is the actual thing. The foundation being built is not separate from the life. It is the life. And it deserves to be inhabited fully, not just managed carefully. This shift doesn't happen through philosophical insight alone. For Capricorn, it typically happens through experience, through arriving at a milestone that was supposed to feel like arrival and noticing that the feeling of incompleteness followed them there. Through realizing, in a moment of rare stillness, that the habit of deferral has costs that are worth examining. Through the relationships and friendships that gently, persistently, invite them to be present rather than perpetually prepared. Saturn, at its highest expression, is not about limitation. It is about mastery, and mastery, genuine mastery, includes the mastery of one's own internal patterns. The same precision that Capricorn brings to building external structures can be brought to understanding the internal structures that shape their experience. And when Capricorn turns that remarkable capacity for clear-eyed assessment inward, the results are usually profound. There's something else that deserves to be said about late success, and about the Capricorn trajectory more broadly. The achievements that come later in life, that are built slowly, through accumulated experience and genuine understanding, tend to produce a different relationship with success than early achievements do. They tend to produce less anxiety about losing what was gained, because the person who built it understands exactly how it was built and knows they can navigate whatever comes next. Capricorn, by the time they arrive at their fullest expression, usually carries a quiet confidence that has nothing to do with performance. It's not the confidence of someone who got lucky, or someone who arrived before they were ready. It's the confidence of someone who knows precisely what they're made of, because they've tested it thoroughly over time. And that kind of confidence, earned rather than assumed, built rather than borrowed, is one of the rarest things in the world. The timing in the end was never the problem. The timing was always the point. Capricorn's later success is not compensation for early struggle. It's not a consolation prize. It's not the universe finally catching up. It is the natural outcome of a particular kind of intelligence, one that refuses to build on sand, that insists on understanding before acting, that measures worth in depth rather than speed. The world will always celebrate the sprint. There will always be stories about early arrival, overnight transformation, the prodigy who made it look effortless. But there is another story, quieter, less celebrated in the moment, more durable in the long run, about the person who took the time to understand what they were building and built it to last. That story belongs to Capricorn, and it's always worth the wait. Saturn doesn't reward speed. It rewards sincerity, the kind that only time can verify.